All right, jumping right in, we're tackling a pretty heavy topic this time. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We all know it happened, but the Wikipedia article you sent really drives home the sheer weight of it all. So let's rewind the clock back to 1945. World War II's in full swing, and the Pacific Theater, well, that's where things get really brutal.
It was a different kind of brutality, you know?
Yeah.
The numbers, the casualty figures, they're staggering. But when you really stop and think, just in that last year of fighting in the Pacific, almost 1 million U.S. families were hit with the loss of someone they loved. That wasn't some far-off conflict. It was deeply personal, casting a shadow over the entire nation. And that's where you really feel the pressure to end the war, to bring those soldiers home.
Yeah, definitely. And with Japan refusing to surrender, the Allies were stuck with this really grim prospect. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, just the scale of it, this two-part operation, Olympic and Coronet, set to begin in, what was it, late 45. It's mind-boggling.
And it wasn't just about the sheer size of the operation, intimidating as that was. The Japanese military, they had their own plan, Operation Kitsuga. Basically, it meant decisive operation, and it boiled down to this unwavering commitment to defend their homeland, no matter the cost. We're talking a level of resistance that could have meant unimaginable casualties on both sides.
Millions, right. We're talking millions of potential casualties.
Millions, potentially. You really have to put yourself in their shoes to understand how dire the situation was. The U.S. was even considering resorting to poison gas, just to try and minimize their own losses during the invasion. It shows you just how desperate they were for a solution, any solution, to stop the bloodshed.
Wow. It's chilling when you think about it like that. And we also have to remember the atomic bombs weren't the first large-scale air raids on Japan. The firebombing campaigns were already incredibly destructive, especially.
Operation Meeting House.
Right, the firebombing of Tokyo.
Yeah. It's hard to even comprehend the devastation caused by that. Imagine Tokyo, an area the size of Manhattan, just gone, reduced to ashes, in a single night. Over 100,000 people, most of them civilians, lost their lives. It remains the single deadliest air raid in history.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, after firebombing like that, was the next step inevitable? Was there no other way?
You know, it's a question that still haunts us, isn't it? Historians, ethicists, we're all still grappling with it. But to really understand, we have to remember that while these firebombings were happening, a whole other kind of weapon was being developed. In secret, the atomic bomb, born from the Manhattan Project. It was this massive top-secret endeavor driven by the very real fear that Nazi Germany was going to get there first. Imagine that pressure.
And they went all in, didn't they? Billions of dollars, so many resources, the best minds in the world, all working under this veil of secrecy. Unbelievable.
It's almost hard to grasp. The weight of what they were doing, the knowledge of the power they were unleashing. You have to wonder about the ethical dilemmas they faced, the potential consequences swirling in their minds. And once the bomb was real, once it wasn't just theory anymore, well, that's when the really terrifying questions started. Where do you even use such a thing? How do you choose?
And that's where the Target Committee comes in, right? This group, tasked with making these impossible decisions. Military significance, concentration of industry, the psychological impact. So much to consider.
And here's something that always gets me. Kyoto, a city known for its incredible history, its beauty, its culture. It was on the short list, can you imagine? It took the personal intervention of Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson, who had a connection to Kyoto, to get it removed as a target. It really makes you think about how you weigh those things, the value of a city, of human life, against the perceived necessity of ending a war.
It's heavy stuff. So with Kyoto off the table, their attention turned to Nagasaki.
That's right. Nagasaki, a major port city with a huge military presence, shipbuilding, naval ordnance.
Mm-hmm.
It was vital to Japan's war effort. And then comes the next agonizing layer, the decision to drop the bomb without warning.
The article mentions the interim committee, right? They were pushing for immediate use, maximum impact, no warning shots. They wanted the full force of this new weapon to just shock Japan into surrendering.
And, you know, they did consider a demonstration explosion, detonating it in a less populated area, more of a show of force. But they ultimately decided against it, convinced that a direct attack would have a far greater psychological effect. But that what if still lingers, doesn't it? Could they have made a different choice?
It's tough not to wonder, especially knowing what we know now. And it wasn't just the U.S. calling the shots, was it? The UK and Canada, their partners in the Manhattan Project, they had to be involved too.
Absolutely. The Quebec Agreement, signed back in '43, required the U.S. to get British consent before using the bomb. And that consent came during a meeting of the Combined Policy Committee. So it wasn't a unilateral decision, it was a collaboration, a group of nations carrying the weight of that choice.
It's one thing to know intellectually that they had this weapon and chose to use it. But then you read the descriptions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki before and after. It's just,
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? We can get caught up in the historical facts, the dates and figures, but it's those human stories that really bring it home. Hiroshima in 45, it was a city full of life.
yeah.
Families, businesses going about their day, totally unaware of the B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, approaching with its deadly cargo.
And the article really gets into the details of the mission. The weather reconnaissance, the in-flight arming of the bomb to minimize risks. It's almost this unsettling sense of calculated precision surrounding this horrific event.
And then that moment of detonation, the pika, this blinding flash, followed by the dawn, the deafening roar. It's almost like those sensory experiences were so intense they had to become their own words. And the aftermath, just unimaginable. The sheer scale of the destruction, the fires.
And it's the survivor accounts that really stick with you. The confusion, the horror, trying to grasp the scale of what had just happened.
And tragically, just 3 days later, Nagasaki, the boxcar. The B-29 carrying the second bomb ran into a bunch of problems. A faulty fuel pump, cloud cover over their primary target, even a near miss with Japanese defenses. And these unforeseen circumstances, they ended up sealing Nagasaki's fate.
The cloud cover forced them to use radar targeting, right? And because of that, the bomb didn't detonate exactly where they intended. But the article says that Nagasaki's geography, the way it's situated, may have actually intensified the bomb's impact.
Either way, the devastation was catastrophic. Entire sections of the city just gone. Tens of thousands killed in that instant, and countless more succumbing to injuries, to radiation sickness in the weeks and months that followed. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. These names became synonymous with the absolute destructive power of the atomic bomb.
It's just the chaos, the suffering in those aftermaths. You can't even imagine. Hospitals overwhelmed, completely unequipped to handle something like radiation sickness. It was a whole new level of horror.
And in the midst of all of that, the world was trying to process what had just happened. This new weapon, the magnitude of the destruction. It was a wake-up call, and one that we're still grappling with today.
The article talks about how Japan's leadership was already feeling the pressure to surrender. The Allies had issued the Potsdam Declaration demanding unconditional surrender, but initially Japan refused. Then came Hiroshima, followed by the Soviet Union declaring war and invading Manchuria, and then, just like that, Nagasaki.
It's this perfect storm of events that ultimately leads to Emperor Hirohito's decision. The war was over, but it was a victory shrouded in such loss, in the knowledge of this terrifying new era that had just begun.
And the human cost, it didn't end with the surrender, did it? The article talks about the Hibakusha, the survivors.
The explosion affected people. The Hibakusha, they didn't just witness the unimaginable, they carried it with them. The physical and emotional scars, the long-term health effects of radiation exposure, cancers, birth defects, a lifetime of uncertainty and fear.
Their stories are a powerful reminder of the enduring legacy of these events. It's a legacy that continues to shape global conversations about peace, about the terrifying potential of nuclear weapons, and the responsibility we have to prevent such horrors from ever happening again.
We've covered a lot of ground, explored the context, the decisions, and the devastating impact of the bombings. But really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a complex and challenging subject, but by engaging with it, by learning from the past, we can hopefully work towards a safer future.